We will be conducting tonight's meeting in person as well as in virtual setting using Zoom. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting tonight on Wave Channel 18 and online through the city's YouTube channel. If you would like to participate in live public comment via the Zoom platform, please refer to the agenda for instructions. Chairman Gilbert will begin the meeting momentarily.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the April 16th, 2025 City of Lincoln Regular Planning Commission meeting. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Hutchinson? Commissioner Jackson?
Yes, present.
Commissioner Jerry Johnson? Commissioner Manning?
Yes, present.
Chairman Gilbert?
Here.
Commissioner Herzog and Vice Chair Eric Johnson is absent with notification.
We have a quorum this evening. We'll go to item number 3, Pledge of Allegiance. I've asked Commissioner Michelle Hutchison to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Bill. Item number 4, agenda modifications. We have a request from the staff that item 6 be moved to after the public hearing.
Yes.
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 Is there any objection to that? Everybody concur? Thank you. Item 5. Public comment on non-agenda items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission. Citizens may address the Planning Commission on any item on the agenda when the item is considered. Citizens wishing to speak may request to speak by raising your hand when requested to do so. This is an opportunity to speak on non-agenda items. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Secretary, do we have any hands raised or anybody in the chambers that wishes to speak?
Chairman Gilbert, I did not receive any cards. I do not see any hands raised online nor in the room.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to the next item, which is item 7. Disclosure of disclosure of ex parte communication. We'll start on this end.
None here.
None here.
None here.
And none here. We're finished with that item. So now we have, next would be, I'm a little confused here. Let's see. The consent, yes, thank you. Review and approve the February 19th, 2025 meeting minutes. Is there any changes or adjustments to the minutes by any member of the?
Second.
Have motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I think I should abstain because I was
Abstention.
not. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Motion passes 4-0-1. Thank you. So the next item then would be
Public hearing.
our public hearing, yes. And that's item 9. There's just one item. Heartland at Hidden Hills Project, a public hearing to consider a tentative subdivision map and development agreement for the proposed residential development within the adopted Village 1's specific plan. The project is proposed to subdivide a 10-acre parcel into 14 single-family residential lots ranging in size from 5,560 square feet to 54,316 square feet. The project site is located south of Oak Tree Lane on Assessor's Parcel number 021-274-026. Applicant and property owner Edward and Elizabeth Johansson. Staff report, please.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Michaela Noble, Associate Planner with the Community Development Department. The project we have before you tonight is the Heartland at Hidden Hills project. So first off, let's just get a little overview of what we're going to be discussing tonight. First off, I'm going to start off with some background information on the Village One specific plan area. Next, we've got requested entitlements, followed by project components, staff findings, and staff recommendations. So first, some background. The Heartland project is located within the Village One specific plan area. In 2012, the City of Lincoln adopted the Village One specific plan and general development plan for the development of over 1,800 acres to include 5,600 dwelling units and 170,000 square feet of commercial and office space. The Village One EIR was certified at this time as well. In 2013, the city adopted an amendment to the Village One specific plan and an addendum to the EIR to address changes to the Oak Tree Lane connection to Sierra College Boulevard and the addition of the elementary school site. In 2015, over 1,700 acres of the specific plan were annexed into the city. In 2020, the city adopted an amendment to the Village One specific plan and rezoned for the Turkey Creek Estates project. And lastly, in 2023, the city adopted another amendment to the specific plan to realign Oak Tree Lane and make minor modifications to the land use plan. The applicants, Edward and Elizabeth Johansson, are requesting the approval of a tentative subdivision map and adoption of a development agreement between the city and developer. The Planning Commission's role in these entitlements is to recommend approval to City Council or denial. I don't know. Not to assume. The proposed project consists of 10 acres within the Village One specific plan area. The project site is located within the Hidden Hills community south of Oak Tree Lane. Previously approved projects within Village One include Esplanade at Turkey Creek Estates, Turkey Creek Estates, Auburn Ravine Estates, the Waterfront, Hidden Hills, and most recently the Stardust project. Here is the proposed tentative subdivision map for the Heartland project. The map features 14 residential lots and open space lots. Residential lot sizes range from approximately 5,500 square feet to 54,000 square feet, depending on the site's topography. The site can be accessed via Silverado Trail, which is part of the Hidden Hills project, and Base Camp Court. Base Camp Court will be a 2-lane road with a sidewalk on the southern side of the street. So just for reference, here is Silverado Trail, and this is Base Camp Court. The project satisfies the city's minimum lot sizes and typical setback requirements.
Would you like us to hold questions for staff or interject as they apply to one of the?
Think about it. I tend to forget later, so why don't you take it
Thank you,
away.
thank you. I have that same problem. With regard to that map there, I noticed that lot open space 4 is shown here, I think elsewhere, as a open space area. I'm surprised that there's no trail connection that goes through that lot. And my bigger question is, how does this trail connect or interact with the other trails within the overall Village One plan?
So to kind of address the question about the overall trail system, I have a slide on kind of the back half that'll kind of show you what that looks like and what's supposed to be built. We don't have any projects to the east that have been approved yet that would connect to this trail, but there will be one eventually. So I'll get to that kind of at the end. And then for the open space, it should be able to be walkable. There's just no connection at that point. There are sidewalks all around that you can get to that point. Not necessarily needing a trail to go right through there.
So if someone on a bicycle could ride across a gravel path or something, or what are we talking about?
Well, the topography would preclude kind of easy access through that open space, correct?
We don't necessarily want to put a trail through there for, I don't really want to, I can't really get into that of why we can't put a trail in there. There's some resources or items that we can't kind of disturb in that area, so we're just leaving it as the open space lot and dedicating it. We don't necessarily want to put a trail system through there.
Yes, I understand that. Why don't I'll hold off the rest of that question
Okay.
until we get to your discussion of the total
Great.
overall trail system.
Carrying on, we have kind of a general layout of the Hidden Hills community. Like I've previously mentioned, Heartland is kind of right within an existing community that's already being constructed. So right here, we have the Heartland project, right here. And all surrounding it is the Hidden Hills project, which is currently being constructed. Just for reference, we have Oak Tree Lane right here in the north. We have Silverado Trail that's going to head south in order to get access to the Heartland project. And so even here with the trail system, you can see that it does, there will be intersections essentially to cross to get to this trail system that is being built within Hidden Hills.
So there will be a trail system through that
Yes,
other open space area?
correct. But not a part of this project. Would be constructed with the Hidden Hills project.
Right. Have you foreseen a way to go across the street when you don't have a street there?
So you do have an intersection right here where you would be able to cross. So it might not necessarily be a direct straight across shot, but there are opportunities to get across the street to get to the trail. Continuing on, just a summary of the project. The proposed project provides for the total of 14 village low-density residential units within the Hidden Hills community, which is private and gated with a homeowners association. The project includes approximately 5.5 acres of open space that features a unique mining quarry that runs through the center of the parcel and a central trail that connects to future trail systems to the east and current trails being built within the Hidden Hills project. As illustrated by the table above, the acreage for each land use would vary slightly from the adopted specific plan. The Village One specific plan requires adoption of a development agreement for each project, which delineates the obligation of the developer in the city. Items outlined in the DA include the construction of utilities, drainage, trails, and so forth. The DA also relies on the Village One infrastructure financing plan to implement infrastructure development. The DA vests the right of a developer to develop the project and subsequent entitlements as approved. The DA runs with the property and is applicable even if property ownership is transferred. The term of the development agreement is 20 years from the effective date. The Planning Commission is responsible for reviewing the draft DA and providing a recommendation to City Council. Staff analyzed the proposed entitlement requests and concluded that they are consistent with the goals, policies, and intent of the city's general plan, the Village One specific plan and general development plan, and the city's subdivision ordinance. City staff has prepared draft conditions of approval for the tentative subdivision map to ensure orderly and timely implementation of the project. Standard and project-specific conditions have been applied. The conditions of approval also include all applicable mitigation measures from the Village One specific plan EIR. All conditions will be subject to verification of compliance by city departments at the appropriate times prior to the project moving forward. In conclusion, staff recommends the Planning Commission determine that the project is exempt from CEQA, adopt a resolution recommending City Council approve the tentative subdivision map for the Heartland at Hidden Hills project, and adopt a resolution recommending City Council approve the development agreement. Thank you.
Yes, if you could review for us the master trail plan for.
So I have the Village One specific plan, the pedestrian circulation map up on the screen. If IT can show that, thank you. Appreciate it. So right where kind of the center of this dot is where the Hidden Hills project is. So you can see the green dotted line that shows the trail system, the anticipated trail system. So we do have a trail in place. Again, this is conceptual, not necessarily a straight line. It's just kind of showing an idea where the trail will be. As you saw on the Hidden Hills map, you see that the trail kind of connects down to the west, where Hidden Hills will be constructing that. And then you'll have this connection to the east, which will extend throughout the entirety of the Village One specific plan. You'll be able to hit north as well to connect to Oak Tree Lane and the sidewalk and multi-use trail that kind of will be adjacent to this Oak Tree Lane extension, or you can kind of come back around this loop.
We're looking at, in terms of trails, is the blue line, a blue dotted line?
So
I'm not
it's
following that very well.
green.
There's not much green showing.
It might be showing up on blue. So this line up here is blue
Okay,
along Friar Ranch. But these down here are a dark emerald green. It might not be showing up the same.
okay,
Yeah, it looks blue.
okay,
Okay,
all right.
thank you. Yeah,
Bluish green.
yeah.
Yeah. So I know the general plan on land use 15.5 says new villages shall provide connectivity to other villages and to the developed portions of the city. You think that's what's being done here? Or?
So this is technically an infill lot. Like I previously showed, the Hidden Hills project wraps all the way around it. So there really is no access point to get to other villages or other areas of the city. It really is connected within this subdivision. If you're talking about the Village One, circulation plan as a whole, that's kind of a different conversation and not really pertinent to the recommendation for tonight.
All right, well, you have a trail shown on this development, and
Sure.
how does it connect to what we see here? Is it that line that does look green down at the left-hand corner?
So I'll show you this picture. So with what is currently being built. Oh, shoot. Let's
I have the same problem.
see. I'll just click through. I wish on this cursor it would actually show rather than a bigger circle of where my cursor is. So again, you have the Hidden Hills Trail right here. So that is the blue line that you're seeing. Again, it's not a straight line, not as interesting that way. It will connect here. This is the trail that Hidden Hills is constructing. So that does follow that dashed line that you saw on the map. And then again, right here at this connection, it'll head east. We don't have we have a formal application in for it, but it hasn't been approved yet. I'm not at liberty to show that to you at the moment. But there is a trail system that is being proposed in that area to go all the way across that remaining parcel. So it does fit in to a T, essentially, to the conceptual plan.
Thank you.
May I add to some of these questions? When I look at this right here with the trails and I see what Hidden Hills is constructing, and I'm on Jerry's same thought process with the walking trails, why can't we have more continuity with those trails versus coming to a road and then having to take a 90-degree right down to an intersection to safely cross the street and then head all the way back up? Don't you see a potential problem right there with just people crossing the street outside of an area where they should? Couldn't we bring those trails together with more continuity and create a sidewalk on that street?
Tony, can I ask a question? Because I think it's a great question.
Yeah.
Are you thinking about even like having underground, underneath the street kind of a trail where you could actually connect under the street instead of on the street.
I mean, that's cool, but no, I wasn't thinking that.
Okay.
I
guess
I
I'm
think
thinking
that,
that
that
then.
gets you there. I'm just thinking, I'm thinking of areas that, I'm seeing other areas in the city where I think we've got it wrong and areas where we've got it right. There's one area, and I don't know the street name, it's in the gated community over in 12 Bridges by the elementary school. Down the middle of one of the roads, they have a trail that crosses the middle of the road. It doesn't come to an intersection at all, but there's delineations in the road that slows traffic. There's a crosswalk and it connects a trail straight across. Obviously, I think there's an opportunity to do that there, although I can't see the topography in that picture, and that may be a restriction. I don't know that. And then there's other areas like, I'll refer to 12 Bridges again, at the corner of 12 Bridges and 12 Bridges, where it comes down as you're entering into Sun City, there's a trail from Corte Madera that ends at 12 Bridges, and it just ends into the road, right? And then there's another trail 150 yards down the road that goes into Sun City. There's no sidewalk, there's nothing. That's a situation where we've got it completely wrong. This situation is somewhat in between those. And I feel like my goal here is always to ask, can we do better? And I feel like this is a situation where we can get it better.
I think it'd be cost prohibitive to do the tunnel or a bridge but I've seen where the pavement has been raised in a trapezoidal shape and carefully marked so that people don't go fast over it. But that might be something that's somewhere between the two, and we could look to that as we do the next phase. But the problem with that is this developer should pay their share of that future cost.
So I'll defer to, we have the project engineer, Tony Frazier here, so we can kind of, if you have any other questions, we'll kind of jump ahead to those, and then we'll bring Tony up and provide some response.
Not at this time.
I do have a question when Tony steps up to the microphone on a separate topic, and I just want to know why. It's not an opinion, but the two lots in the proposed plan, why are two of them so big? I just want to understand that, and it may be topography,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
We
yeah.
figured a question like this was
Yeah.
going to come up. There is, there's a reason,
I just
so yeah,
wanna-
I'll
yeah,
defer to
I'd love
Tony on that, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
54,000 square feet.
Mhm.
Yes,
it's
I
quite a
know.
range, you
I
know.
know, I have that written down. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually thought I was misreading.
Is that a
or-
typo?
or
Yeah.
misprinted, but I went ahead and read what the staff gave us.
Right.
And I would just interject that, well, we spent maybe 40 minutes or an hour out at the site today, and it was a revelation just in terms of the topography. So the 54,000 square foot site is largely kind of on a hillside. And so when connecting those trails, I mean, I'll let Tony kind of speak to the complexity of grading this site, because there's all these small hills, and then in the middle of this small subdivision is basically a quarry, a pit. So it's very deep, relatively deep. So the connections where they've had to put the trail would have been like outside of that quarry, and a path can't cross that. It just couldn't. You'd have to build a bridge, and it would be going down. And so it's pretty interesting to see in person. That's all I can shed light on, so.
I mean, there's also ADA standards that has to be addressed, and that's done at engineering stage. We have conditions that are imposed to the project, and that will, I'm sure Tony can add more to that, but trail design is always tricky because they have to make sure that not only it works, but also there's ADA.
Yeah, it's the
compliance.
ADA.
Any other questions at the moment?
Just a comment that's just a tad afield for tonight's subject, but there are several places in the adjoining property, in the adjoining parcels, that have loop systems of roads that I spent some time with the TAC committee on renaming half of Oak Tree Lane because fire department was concerned that if they got a call saying this accident occurred at the intersection of Lasso and Oak Tree Lane, they wouldn't know if it was, what part of that, which intersection it was. And here, I'm afraid we've replicated the same thing in the adjoining properties.
Yeah, so we were actually doing some research on this property to see when the street names were selected. It was back in 2021, actually. Different staff at that time made those decisions. So the recent feedback I'd been receiving on all of my project routing to different departments, that's where the comment came up from our public safety staff. So that comment might not have been made at that time. We do have some loops within the city, but I think, a general practice going forward was to switch that up rather than kind of repeating, an error or something that they're seeing isn't working anymore.
It's probably not too late to go back and revisit that, though.
The final maps are all approved for that subdivision and they're being built, so.
Well, there's ways to change street names, though. Okay, that's enough of that.
I'll invite Tony up then to take the lead.
Good evening, Tony.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for inviting us here to really get to a milestone on Heartland. Before I start, I'd like to, again, thank you for listening to us and thanking staff from Mel to Michaela for all the hard work she put in. Wonderful presentation, makes my job easier. To Christian and engineering, everybody. I mean, this has been 3 years in progress or more. Also, we have here Brian, who's been project manager working with Silverado on Hidden Hills and working with us on Heartland. And I believe Ed Johansson, the owner, is online listening, which really this project started from the vision when he worked on Hidden Hills. We had this hole in the project. And as you know that, when you have a project, you have a hole in it, it becomes a problem in the future. So we worked hard to actually chase the owner for different states to find them, to be able to, for Ed to move forward and bring this project forward. Otherwise, this project will be a hole and will become a trail problem, not only for Hidden Hills, but you will never have a connectivity going to the east. So Ed solved the problem by getting this project forward. We were thinking we're going to be same time reaching Hidden Hill construction. We're behind, but here we are. At least we're getting to the finish line. And again, thank you to current staffs that making us move forward. Again, this is an infill project. I appreciate a lot of the questions, so I can address them. Also, right now, we're not discussing Hidden Hills. I can answer the questions, how to tie into Hidden Hills. The project is within the envelope. Hidden Hills is under construction. If you want to maybe put the map up. Okay. That's fine. The color map is good. And let's see. Yeah, I don't know. So one of the questions was about trails. I know this map is general, but if you look at the center of this intersection, actually, this is a stop sign, and that's why we looked at the safety for the trail to cross. But the trail doesn't stop there. The reason it's crossing the intersection, it continues north. So the trail really, you come to this point, it's really hard to see it because of the color in here. So the trail comes up here, it crosses the street, and there's a crosswalk for it. It's marked for the trail. And then you go north to Oak Tree Lane or south. Originally, we had actually the trail more to the south, and it was continuing to Hidden Hills, not Hidden Hills, to Lincoln Hills. But Lincoln Hills doesn't allow us to continue there, so we lost that battle. We couldn't connect because the trail on Lincoln Hills are all private, so we couldn't get the public trail to the private. And the city has fixed that after Lincoln Hills. So now all the open space trails are becoming public, so you have ability to do connection. And again, Michaela did a good job mentioning to the east, although she cannot talk about what's coming to the east. I can talk a little bit more. We are working, to move forward with standing map. It's at the city And we are doing the trails that you see where we take it from this point, and we went extra and beyond the specific plan to provide more connectivity with the trail. And we'll be, looking forward to discuss that. Hopefully, we're pushing for next month, but probably in June, to bring it forward, and you can see how we could connect. But we'll be connecting back to Oak Tree Lane several places, even outside the gate. So you don't have to go through the gate to connect. So we're able to work with the developer to really invite the public to go from the open space, from Oak Tree Lane, and reach the project internally, even though it's gated, and feel free to go into the open space. Typically, one of the items was, one of the items was mentioned about crossing, which I appreciated, considering the cost, because if you're not go under, that's a lot of money. But besides that, we have a drainage constraint from the state and all of the above. So a lot of these roadways have culvert to constrain drainage because you're supposed to hold water behind them and so forth. So we're looking for ADA, we're looking for drainage, LIDs, et cetera. And then you have the PCCP constraint. You cannot be closer to the creeks. You have to be so far away. And then you have features that we cannot discuss in open space where you cannot cross next to them. But in my opinion, we're trying to do opportunities. But look what happened on Auburn Ravine, where you're going on Ferrara Shore going north. We couldn't even go to Auburn Ravine open space what we created. We have to be by the road. So a lot of these opportunities that's available, we get constrictions and restrictions and saying no by open space agencies. And that's why you don't have a lot of this opportunity. I love somebody on a bike to go, or there's water, you can go to it, and our hands are tied behind our backs. So we do what we can, and the city said, now you have to do it ADA. So that's another issue. But, there's opportunity within the open space for people to explore as long, it is not ADA, we don't have to mark it. There's no signage going to say you cannot get off the trail. But people have to use caution, safety, et cetera. Because I know when we were meeting with Army Corps and open space on Naked Crossing, the HOA was saying, I don't want people to go to open space and fish and everything. The Army Corps said, if the goat can or the sheep goat can, then the person can. It's just they have to confine it within limitation.
Right, but can't you have a steeper trail than might be allowable by ADA by simply signing that this is not ADA accessible? I mean, that's done a number of places in the city now.
So on this trail, we were able to manage to go through the whole thing in exceeding what was shown in specific plans, not just a straight. And all of this is, less than 5%. So we achieve what they want and more. Other places, if they want to have non-ADA, the city can. And there's already places where there's already like foot traffic, and so we cannot restrict bikers. We're not going to remove them if they are in the open space. And there, especially as you go east, there's a lot of features. There's rock formations, there are beautiful things we're trying to create, so people trying to see them. So we're putting the trail where we can next to these features, and that's what we'll share next time. But also we're limited to how many feet we are from the creek and this and that. So my goal is that if you look at all my project, I have lakes, I have this, I have features in the open space. I like to leave the open space better than when I started it. And the restriction becomes more and more. So as far as the big lot, I think that was covered. Really, one of the fortunate things so far is that the Johansson family is going to be living on one of those lots. So probably two, which is, they want to be in the community, they want to be part of it. One of the restrictions we had, actually, we had more lots, and he lost them, not only because of open space creation, but also because of fire department and engineering, and the cul-de-sac has to be shrunk back. So we had it further to the east. We had more lots, and we had to lose them. So that's why those lots got bigger, because of the cul-de-sac got to move to the west. And features, we have a lot of rock formation and so forth. So we just lost, I think, one lot there. We were 3 lots there. I think I covered everything. I'll be glad to answer any question you have. I really appreciate the time and.
All we have is.
Fine.
I really thank you, and hopefully we can get a yes so we can move forward to build this. And it will be nicer getting constructed before they start selling in Hidden Hills, so they don't have infill project being built at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, Tony. Okay, being that there's no more questions, I'll open the public hearing. And, staff? If you have any?
Chairman Gilbert, I did not receive any cards. I do not see any hands raised online nor in the room.
With that, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission, and any additional comments that you'd like to make, motion, whatever is your pleasure.
I'd like to make a comment. I just wanted to thank you, Michaela. I thought that the information that you provided this time with all of the mapping and detail was excellent. I really appreciated that, especially the timeline of all the different areas that we have gone through over the last several years.
Yeah, we have a lot of Village One projects kind of in the door, so it's kind of, this is kind of a good starter map to kind of get you guys refreshed on Village Ones. We have some new commissioners who might not be super aware of what's happening, so just wanted to give you all a timeline of how Village One started, where we're at now, and, you know, hopefully to see where it goes in the near future.
Comments? Anybody want to put a motion forward?
Do you want a single motion or do you want three motions? First to determine that the project is
What's the staff?
exempt?
What's the staff suggest?
The determination exempt from CEQA is in both resolutions. So, but you can go forward with what you were stating and then the first resolution separately, the resolution separately.
All right, well, then, Mr. Chairman, I would move that we find that the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, and no further environmental document is required.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Jerry Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Hutchinson,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Manning,
Yes.
and Chairman Gilbert.
Yes. Motion passes 5-0.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we adopt a resolution recommending the City Council approve tentative subdivision map for the proposed Heartland at Hidden Hills project.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Jerry Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Hutchinson,
Yes.
Commissioner Manning,
Yes.
and Chairman Gilbert.
Yes. Motion passes 5-0.
Then, Mr. Chairman, I would move that we adopt a resolution recommending the City Council approve a development agreement for the Heartland at Hidden Hills project.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Jerry Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Hutchinson,
Yes.
Commissioner Manning,
Yes.
and Chairman Gilbert.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Jerry. We now finished up with item 9, our public hearing.
Chairman Gilbert, we can, oh yeah, the next item will be 6.
Yes, I
Yes.
was just going to go back to that. We'll go back to item 6, informational items from staff. They say we have a couple tonight, so staff, take it away.
Good evening, Mel Pavlinas. As we indicated last month, we're going to have a CEQA workshop presented by Adrienne Graham. I'm sure you're familiar with her work. She's done many projects, support of staff over the years. A lot of projects more recently are within Village One. And so we had asked her to present a quick workshop for you. We have about 30 plus slides. We'll try to get it in within about half an hour, but depends on if there's any Q&A from your commission. I think it'll be worthwhile. I know a few of you have had the recent class offsite, So hopefully this will be an addendum to that, more kind of dovetail to what you do and projects, given her history here with the city. So without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and have Adrian come up and get the presentation going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. Good evening, Commissioners. As Mel said, my name's Adrienne Graham, and I'm an environmental and planning consultant. Have been so for about 3 decades. I've worked on a variety of projects in the city of Lincoln, including the environmental impact report on this building, but started in the 90s with the original 12 Bridges Specific Plan, EIR, and then most recently have been working on several environmental documents related to Village One, including the specific plan EIR and the supplement that was prepared for it that Michaela mentioned. So this evening, what I hope to do is provide a broad overview and basic understanding of the various components of CEQA, particularly as they relate to the kinds of things that would come before the Planning Commission. I know that some of you have already been on the commission. You've had to review environmental documents, so some of this will not be new at all. But again, the purpose here is to have sort of a basic understanding of the overall process and of CEQA. It's a lot of information, and I don't expect to hit all of those 30 slides, but please feel free to stop me to ask a question if I do skip over a slide and there's something you're interested in, or even if there's something I'm talking about. And then we also have time for questions at the end. And I'm happy to try to answer questions about that are very specific too, if you have some, as opposed to just the overview. So, let's see, So, as part of the overview, I plan on talking about the purposes of CEQA, when CEQA applies to a project, the various types of CEQA documents that we prepare, and then I don't think I'll have time for tribal consultation. It's something that's become more important recently, but if there are any questions about it, I'd be happy to discuss it at the end. So, whoops, wrong one. Okay, there we go. So to begin, CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, was adopted in 1970, right on the heels of the federal adoption of the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, which was adopted in 1969. When the legislature adopted CEQA, it made a number of statements of intent, and I've summarized some of those here. But essentially, the purpose of CEQA from the legislative perspective was to protect important environmental resources, things like air quality, water quality, scenic resources, biological resources, and at the same time recognize that human activity also will continue. There needs to be a way to blend both these protections of the environment, but also allowing for human activities such as development. So, now, from a practical perspective, CEQA is essentially an informational process. The CEQA documents that come before you are meant to be informational, to provide it to the decision makers an analysis of the environmental consequences of approving a project. The CEQA process also enables the lead agency, in this case the city, to consider modifications to the project to avoid or lessen impacts, and that might be done by changing the project description itself, maybe in response to comments from the public or agencies, to or adopting mitigation measures that constrain or limit impacts on resources, or adopting an alternative. That's if there's an EIR, it's possible to adopt an alternative to the project. At the end of the day, with respect to EIRs, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment, but if you have an EIR before you, again, it's an informational document, and the information that's provided regarding those environmental consequences is not meant to be the only information you consider. The idea is to balance that information with the benefits of the project. And those can be pretty broadly defined, but they might be economic, more tax revenue, or more increased activity in the community, or social, such as providing housing to meet demand, or a variety of other things. And so the idea is to take those, on the one hand, we have these environmental consequences, on the other hand, we have these benefits, and to decide, do those benefits outweigh the consequences. EIRs and neg decks, which we'll also talk about, they're not intended to recommend approval or denial of a project, but rather, again, to just say, here is what the environmental effects would be. Similarly, an EIR will have alternatives in it and must also identify the environmentally superior alternative, but that's not meant to say that that is what has to be adopted. It's not a recommendation, but rather it needs to be considered. There do need to be findings if it's going to be rejected. So when does CEQA actually apply to a project? Any action on the part of a public agency that could have a physical effect on the environment needs to be considered as long as it's a discretionary action. So discretionary actions, essentially those decisions where the, in this case, the Planning Commission has the latitude to approve or deny the project. In situations where somebody brings forth a project and as long as it meets the applicable regulations and standards and whatnot, it has to be approved, are considered ministerial, and they are not subject to CEQA regardless of what their impacts might be. And so an example of that might be like a building permit, say for an 8-story building. Well, there'll be some impacts, but if it meets all the standards, it can get that building permit approved. There's no CEQA involved because the city has no choice but to approve it. So there are several types of CEQA documents that you'll see, and I'm going to walk through each of those. I'm going to skip this slide, starting with exemptions. So under CEQA, if a project qualifies as a project under CEQA, it might still be exempt from environmental analysis, and that'll occur in a couple of different ways. One, there are statutory exemptions where the legislature has just said flat out, these do not need to be environmentally analyzed. There's no CEQA involved in this. And that would be things like ministerial projects, as I was just describing. In some cases, emergency projects might be exempt. There are some other examples. Or in some cases, it's simply a project. Like the legislature decided that the LA Olympics were not going to be subject to CEQA. And you can be sure there were environmental effects, but once the legislature makes that determination, that's over. More commonly, now you're unlikely to see many of these statutory exemptions, but more commonly you'll see categorical exemptions with your projects. And those would be situations where a project fits into a class that's been identified in the CEQA guidelines. And those could be things like repairing an existing facility, small expansions to an existing facility, habitat restoration. There's a series of classes identified. If the project fits into those, one of those classes and doesn't meet one of the exceptions that I'll talk about, then you simply have to do a categorical exemption. There's a form filled out. There might be some supporting documentation. It's submitted to the county clerk and the clearinghouse. And then at that point, there's a 35-day window that starts in which people can challenge the exemption. And then once that's over, boom, you're done environmentally. The exception to categorical exemptions is that even if you fit within a class, if your project is going to have an environmental effect, such as, say, loss of sensitive habitat, then you can't do the CE. Because if there's something particular about your project that basically says, even though it's in this class, there could be this significant effect, the CE is not applicable, and you have to move on to either a neg deck or an EIR. There are some other important exemptions. One you used this evening with the Heartland project, and that is if a project is within a specific plan area and the specific plan has been adopted and there's been an EIR prepared for it, and the project will not change the specific plan, won't change the land use designations or anything is consistent with the EIR assumptions, then it can be exempt under 15182. And as I said, that was the resolution that you adopted this evening for Heartland. And then there are some others as well, but I think that's the one you're most likely to see. All right, so moving on to the next level of environmental review, which would be a neg deck or a mitigated neg deck. I'm just going to call them neg decks. If you have a project that qualifies as a project under CEQA, isn't exempt, but all of its impacts would be less than significant, or there's mitigation that can reduce them to a less than significant level, then you can prepare a mitigated negative declaration. This is typically done by doing an initial study using the environmental checklist in the CEQA guidelines, Appendix G of the guidelines, and it asks a series of questions, and then there are findings made. They have to be supported with evidence. These neg decks can be standalone, say for an individual project, or they might be, you might see them with a project that comes in under one of the specific plan EIRs, but where some of the impacts weren't analyzed fully in the specific plan EIR. There's one fairly big disadvantage, or I shouldn't say disadvantage, but a potential vulnerability of a neg deck is that it is subject to the fair argument standard. And what that means is that if someone comes forward and can make a fair argument that that the findings regarding the significance of impacts are not correct, that there could be a significant impact even with mitigation, then the courts will be likely to overturn that neg deck. It's a pretty low bar. So they're easily challenged, or rather, they're harder to defend. There are neg decks that are not overturned, but they're a lot easier to overturn. And so sometimes what you'll find is the city might decide that a project, maybe it seems like all the impacts can be mitigated, could be subject to a neg deck, but if it's controversial or you think you'll pull a lawsuit, it's just prudent to go the lengthier and more elaborate yet safer route of an EIR.
Question?
Yeah.
Would it be possible for the city to go, because looking at a negative deck, but not sure that's the correct way to go, and to avoid the, what'd you say, the argument, the
Fair argument
fair argument, could the city go to the court and ask for a declarative judgment?
I've never heard of that happening, and I don't think so, because you would have to present all of the information, the evidence that would support the finding. So you're going to do that through the process anyway. And by the time you did all of that, you probably could have done a focused EIR. So, and we often will, when there's often a balancing act with these things. And so we'll be, a lot of times applicants, developers, they want to move things quickly. But one way to look at it is that neg deck processes are shorter than EIR processes, unless you get sued. And then all of a sudden they're a couple of years out. So it might just be prudent to move forward with a more focused EIR. It depends though. And like I said, there have been neg decks that were not overturned. So I wanted to point out the nature of the impacts that we have to analyze in a neg deck or an EIR too. So in the environmental checklist, there are 20 topics. These are the 20 topics that are included in the checklist. So each of these needs to be considered. And underneath each of these topics, there'll be several different questions. In some cases, maybe 2, in some cases, maybe 10. And you'll have subtopics. So for example, with hydrology and water quality, you have to look at drainage, flooding, groundwater, surface water, water quality, all within this heading of hydrology and water quality. I wanted to just show an example in case you hadn't seen one of the checklist. So for each of those 20 topics, the checklist has this format where you'll see here I've used mineral resources because it's short. Each topic will be formatted in this way. Across the top, you'll see potentially significant, less than significant with mitigation, less than significant, and no impact. And then down the left side, a couple of questions. If you can check the box, any of those three boxes to the right, you can do a neg deck. But if for any impact, you have to check potentially significant impact, meaning that at least when you prepare this document, you're not aware of mitigation that will reduce the impact to a less than significant level, you have to prepare an EIR. And you can use this format to focus down those 20 issues to say maybe fewer in the EIR. So for example, with this example, we would not include mineral resources in the EIR because there's no impact. The process for the neg deck is fairly straightforward. As I said, you have to prepare a draft initial study, which usually includes the environmental checklist. That's put out for public review, usually for 30 days. And then any comments that are received need to be considered. There doesn't need to be a point-by-point comment and response like you'll see in an EIR, but typically in staff report, the staff will summarize what comments were received and then indicate whether or not any of those comments warranted changes to the draft initial study or why those comments don't alter the conclusions of the draft initial study. Then when you go into hearings, you'll have to adopt the negative declaration and also a mitigation monitoring program. So for all the mitigation measures that are identified, the monitoring program will include timing, potentially some additional actions that are necessary, who's going to implement the mitigation measure and who's going to monitor it. And then the city is supposed to keep track of that monitoring plan throughout the life of the project. After all of that's been done, you can move on to adopting the project. And once the project's adopted, staff will file a notice of determination with the county clerk and the clearinghouse within 5 days. That's important because if you are within that 5-day window, then there's only a 30-day window in which somebody can legally challenge the neg deck. If you don't make it in the 5 days with your NOD, then there's a 6-month window. So you can imagine from the project's perspective, having that certainty of knowing whether or not there'll be a lawsuit is important early on. Okay, so any questions about neg decks? Okay. So I will move on to EIRs, which, these tend to be the weightier, more complex documents that are prepared. Essentially, anytime you have one or more impacts that cannot be mitigated below the threshold, cannot be mitigated to a less than significant level, then you're going to have to prepare an EIR and it may be very focused just on those issues, or it may be very broad, looking at many of those 20 topical areas that I mentioned. The advantage of an EIR relative to a neg deck is that the EIR is subject to what they call the substantial evidence standard. And what that means is that if there is substantial evidence to support the findings regarding significance in the EIR, the court should defer. They should uphold the EIR. There will be in lawsuits challenges to whether or not those findings are really substantial enough or adequate. But in essence, CEQA recognizes that you can have, say, 2 different experts on the same topic who come to 2 different conclusions, both with substantial evidence to support their conclusions, and that's perfectly fine. But as long as the conclusions in the EIR are supported by substantial evidence, the court should defer to the EIR, should uphold it. And so it really is a recognition that you can go either way, but the city, in this case, city, would have the option of saying, this is our expert, or these are our findings, and they're supported by substantial evidence. Unlike neg decks, EIRs must consider alternatives. And then there's also a little more, I think, opportunity for tiering EIRs to the specifics of a project or conditions and approvals that the city's considering. So I'll talk about that more in a moment too. The EIR process is somewhat similar to the neg deck process, but a bit more elaborate. It'll start with a notice of preparation that is distributed to public agencies and members of the public who've expressed interest, saying that, okay, we're embarking on this environmental impact report for this project. It'll describe the project and what we think the environmental effects to be analyzed are. And then that kicks off what we call scoping, essentially determining what the scope of the analysis should be. And so at the close of the notice of preparation period, the people will have commented on what they think the impacts might be that should be addressed, what methods should be used, et cetera. So those are then taken into consideration by the preparers of the EIR, usually a consultant, because EIRs tend to be technical and a little heftier than other documents. So all of those technical areas are then analyzed in the draft EIR, which then goes out for review for a minimum 45 days. At the end of that period, all of the comments that are received on the EIR are collated. And then CEQA requires that for every substantive comment on the adequacy of the EIR, you have to have a written response. And so you will see a point-by-point comment, response, comment, response, comment, response sort of document. That response to comment document then becomes the final EIR, and it'll also often include a chapter that summarizes any of the changes that were made to the draft EIR analysis, usually in a red line strikeout format. So the final EIR and the draft EIR together are the EIR for the project. They have to be considered together. Similar to the neg deck, every mitigation measure has to be included in the monitoring program. When you get to hearing in this case, the EIR must be, so the term of art is that you certify that the environmental impact report adequately analyzes the effects of environmental effects of the project. So EIRs are certified, they're not adopted, but the mitigation monitoring program is adopted. In addition, you'll have findings of fact, which reiterate the findings of the EIR and include some other findings. And then a statement of overriding considerations where if there is a significant unavoidable impact, the benefits of the project that need to be considered in that balancing act need to be described, and there needs to be evidence to support them. So sometimes you'll see things like a fiscal study will be referenced or something. Once all of those resolutions have been approved, then it's time to move on to adopting the project. And similar to the neg deck, you want to file that notice of determination within 5 days, because again, that gives people only 30 days to challenge in court. I thought it might be useful just to go through the format of an EIR and the technical chapters of the EIR. So,
Is this one an eye test?
yeah, I'm sorry. I know, it is. So this is the format that most EIRs will follow. There may be some differences, but most of these components are required by the CEQA guidelines. So there'll be an introduction. There'll be a project description, which describes the project objectives, and those will be important for alternatives, as well as the project. That describes the activities that will occur with respect to implementing the project. And so that's going to be anything related to construction, ground clearing, building, et cetera, as well as the activities once the project's constructed, how many housing units or how much commercial square footage, what kinds of activities will occur on the project site, things of that nature. And then what also must be described is anything that is not within the project site itself, but is necessary for the project to move forward. And typically, that would be something like bringing a road or a water line into the project site, if it's not, say, adjacent to existing infrastructure. And so any of those offsite improvements also need to be addressed in that project EIR. The project description also will list the approvals that the EIR is supposed to cover. So typically that'll be that first project, say a specific plan, but then the EIR will specify the subsequent approvals tentative maps perhaps, or conditional use permits, et cetera, that the city plans to use the EIR to cover. And there'll also be a list of all of the actions that are required by other agencies. So if, for example, a project's going to fill wetlands, it'll state that they'll need a 404 permit from the Army Corps of Engineers. There will also be a summary chapter. And in that, in addition to summarizing the project and significant impacts, et cetera, the meat of that chapter will be the summary table. It's usually a tabular form where every impact statement will be identified. There'll be, it'll say whether or not the impact was determined to be significant or less than significant. And then if it's significant, it'll list the mitigation measures that are required, and then the significance after mitigation. So you can see right then and there, you can go through and count up, how many significant and unavoidable impacts do we have, for example. Then there's also a summary comparing the effects of the alternatives to the project. I'll talk more about the environmental effects chapter in a moment. EIRs have to have alternatives analyses, and the alternatives are not just, any old thing. You wouldn't have a residential project and then as an alternative have a circus, but the alternatives have to, well, and that is because the alternatives must achieve most, not necessarily all, but most of the project objectives. And that's why those project objectives are so important, because we have to see how, will this alternative get us part of the way there? And then they also have to avoid or eliminate impacts that were significant under the project. So typically what you'll see with alternatives is something like a reduced footprint or redesigned footprint. So in order to avoid, say, a wetland, or to reduce the amount of prime farmland that's converted or something like that. And maybe a separate alternative that reduces the amount of activity associated with the project. So reduce the number of housing units or the amount of commercial square footage, which will reduce traffic, air quality, noise, et cetera. So then in that alternatives chapter, there'll also be a no project alternative. What happens if you don't do anything? And that includes what happens if you don't do anything, but somebody else comes along and builds out under the current zoning. So you can even have a situation where there's an alternative that's worse than the project if the zoning is more intensive. And then you'll identify the environmentally superior alternative. And then there's some other things that are required by CEQA that are of less import, I think, although important, but references, persons contacted, are obvious. So getting back to those technical issues that are topical issues that were in the slide, the 20 issues, within the environmental impacts analysis chapter, whatever of those topical issues are going to be covered, each of those sections will have a similar format. And this is really the meat and potatoes of CEQA and the analytical framework that we use to analyze impacts. So typically an introduction, there'll be an environmental setting that lays out what the existing conditions are relative to whatever the topic is. And then a summary of the regulations, the federal laws, federal and state, local laws, ordinances, policies that will can serve to minimize the environmental effects. And then the environmental analysis itself. So within the environmental impacts and mitigation section, typically we'll describe the methods that were used to analyze the impacts. That might be quite qualitative, but it might also reference, say, models that were used. We use modeling for air quality, greenhouse gases, other things, and the assumptions that were made in doing the analysis. The standards of significance for each impact will be identified, and then the actual project impacts themselves, those impacts that go into that summary table that I described. So for the impacts and mitigation section, there'll be a statement of the impact. So say back to hydrology, if this were a hydrology chapter, there would be, the project would say increase flooding. and then a discussion of what that impact means, how that would occur, what the severity of it would be, et cetera, and then how the applicable regulations would be brought to bear and how, so that you can say at the end of the day, the project, as modified by existing law, would do X. And then you look to see, are we above the applicable standard of significance or below it? If the project impact is above it, it's a significant impact and requires mitigation. If it's below it, it's less than significant, and we're done. Mitigation is never required under CEQA for less than significant impacts. Sometimes they're added just as a, because somebody thinks it's a, there's additional something that should be done, but they're not ever required for less than significant impacts. There should be an explanation of how the mitigation measure is going to reduce the impact, and then a conclusion with respect to the significance after mitigation. And then, so you would go through that for every subtopic within the main topic area. And then also look at cumulative impacts, which are essentially how the effects of the project in combination with other projects, similar projects that are going on, and whether or not the project would contribute. The term of art for CEQA is considerably, but it's easier to say, would that project contribution be significant, or would it be too minor to be of concern? I do want to recognize that there are a number, as I said earlier, a number of different types of EIRs that we can prepare. We can do things that are pretty tailored to projects and their impacts. I want to spend a little bit of time on program EIRs in particular. So a program EIR is something that can be used when there is a plan that, say, is going to be an umbrella over a number of projects or a series of projects that could be analyzed together. So for the city, there's a number of specific plan EIRs that are program EIRs for things like, the villages, Village 1 or Village 5. And they give you the broad brush impacts, the overall impacts, so that when projects like Heartland come in, you can see how do they fit into that overall analysis. And in some cases, that's all you need to do, you're done. In other cases, there's some additional work that needs to be done. So when we have a program EIR, as I said, the project comes in, you look to see how it fits in. Sometimes there's additional work that needs to be done. In some cases, that'll simply be tiered from the program EIR. So you can think of that as the first tier, and the second tier is the more detailed project-specific analysis. In some cases, a project might need to amend the specific plan because, as we all know, over time, things change, people come up with better ideas, or that, markets change. And so, or when they go to do their mapping, they decide that it doesn't make sense to put something there, but it should be over there. If any of those things require a revision or amendment to the specific plan or to whatever the project is that the program EIR covers, then you don't need to redo the whole packet, the whole program EIR. You can simply focus on what those changes are, and you have to figure out, are they significant or not? Do they change the program EIR conclusions in such a way that you might have a new significant impact, or one of those significant unavoidable impacts might be substantially more severe? So I'm going to just skip right ahead to if we have a situation where the changes to the project are going to result in a new or more severe impact, then we can do a supplement or a subsequent. I've never, frankly, fully understood the difference between these. It's not really clear in the guidelines, but supplements are for minor changes and subsequents are for bigger changes, whatever those might be. An example of this is with Village 1. A couple of years ago, they came in and they realigned Oak Tree Lane. It used to go down to Sierra College Boulevard, and now it's a loop. That loop meant they had to change land uses as well. We went and we thought, well, not changing the amount of acreage, you're not, changing the number of units. This is probably a probably doesn't require any additional CEQA beyond an addendum. But it turned out that that loop redirected traffic in such a way that we had a new traffic noise, a traffic noise impact on a segment that hadn't been included in the traffic noise impact in the original EIR. So we did a supplement. We did an EIR that focused on that one impact, that noise impact. Then we also included documentation on why all the other impacts would not change. Now, if you're fortunate enough that your project changes some, maybe you need a specific plan amendment, but though you don't have a new significant impact or substantially more severe impact, you can do an addendum. And you are going, if you haven't already, you will be seeing addenda with some of these projects coming through for Village One, for example, because even though they're requiring some fairly minor land use or zoning changes, those changes are not altering the program enough that it alters, the conclusions of the original EIR. And so that makes your CEQA analysis. That means that, so then what happens is that when it comes to you, the project comes to you, you'll be asked to certify that the original EIR as supplemented in 2024 and then as documented in the addendum fully addresses the environmental impacts of whatever project's before you. So very handy way to go about it. Addenda do not need to be publicly circulated in the same way that neg decs or EIRs do, but they can be. And I think the city's got a good process where they just include it with all the other information. So if somebody does have environmental concerns, they can see that, yes, those were addressed, because we go through all the environmental potential impacts and say, this is why the proposed amendments are not going to have a significant effect. So I think that's probably my time, yeah? If people have questions about tribal consultation, I'd be happy to talk about that. I think other than that, if anybody just has any general or specific questions, or if Mel has something to add.
Well, thank you for your presentation. Any questions from the Planning Commission? Jerry?
Order of magnitude, how many endangered or threatened species of plants and animals are there in Lincoln and in Lincoln's sphere of influence?
I'm going to guess, thinking back to the tables that are in the EIRs that go through all of the, basically what happens is the biologist goes to the California Native Diversity Database, California Natural Diversity Database, yeah. And it'll spew out a list of like everything that's been identified in a survey within like 5 miles. And then they go through and they figure out, do we have the habitat on site for that? For typically for plants, I think we'll see something on the order of 20 or 30 plants identified, and yet only maybe, depending on whether or not we have wetlands in the project area, perhaps 2 to 5 are found to be potentially occurring within the project site. And then there are floristic surveys that are done that will further narrow that down. If they go out and survey it during the flowering season and they don't see it, then they'll say that even though they're in the database, they don't exist on this project site. Wildlife species, oh, tons. I'm trying to think, probably another 30 or 40 potentially, again, through the database. We will typically have, I would say, 10 to 15 habitat types, including wetlands and species that we're looking at in this area. And there are some species that you'll see in almost every environmental document in Lincoln.
Are these bigger than usual or typical?
No, it's fairly typical for the Central Valley. So for example, Swainson's hawk, and sometimes it changes too. When I first started working in Lincoln, all the Swainson's hawks lived down in the woodland area. And a Swainson's hawk's foraging area is 10 miles. And so if you're within 10 miles of foraging habitat and you're going to get rid of, like, say, tomato plants or, or agricultural land, that row crops or something, that's an impact on their foraging habitat that you have to consider. So for years, we didn't worry about it in Lincoln because they were all in woodland. And then they started moving. And so now Swainson's hawk is one of the species we have to look at. And then there are also species that are, become listed over time, so the species list changes over time a bit. So
And includes insects too, right?
recently, yes, there's a bumblebee and we don't have many, I haven't seen many insects yet up here. They're down, I think, in like the more coastal areas, you'll see more.
I have a question on that situation you talked about on Oak Tree Lane. We
Uh-huh.
did the loop and then another impact was found. Is that usually someone from outside, like addressing that, saying, hey, check it out, we got a problem here? Or is it something done?
Oh, no, it was your friendly environmental consultant. So essentially, and this is part of scoping. So essentially what happened is that, Tony brought in this map and, here's this change. And we knew that the property owners at the southern end of the project didn't really want that road going through their property. So, okay, we're going to loop it. That makes perfect sense. And we all looked at it and went, shouldn't be a problem. But we have to consider what things will change. Well, one of the things that'll change will be traffic, because now people are going to have to go over to down 193 to Sierra College Boulevard. So that segment on Sierra College Boulevard will have more traffic on it than it was originally analyzed. And that segment on 193 will have more traffic than originally analyzed. Again, initially, we were like, probably not a problem, but to do due diligence, we need to think about this. And so, and we knew that we had significant unavoidable impacts on noise, traffic, specifically traffic noise on a couple of those segments. And so we went to the noise consultant and asked him to model that. And he determined that there were 2 new segments where the traffic noise, there's an actual threshold, I want to say 5 dB decibels, but I'm not sure that's right in this instance. But there was a decibel threshold, like if it increases by more than X, and it did. There's actually mitigation that by using rubberized asphalt, you could bring it below the threshold. But in this instance, and this is another sort of thing that you'll probably see because of where Lincoln's located in certain documents, the 2 segments were outside of the city's jurisdiction, so in Placer County. And therefore, even though we knew there was mitigation, the city could not force the county to use it. And so they made a finding that the mitigation was basically under another jurisdiction and could not be implemented by the city, and therefore it would be significant and unavoidable. So the city's essentially saying, hey, Placer County, when you widen these roads and resurface them, you should use rubberized asphalt to protect these homes from noise, but we can't be sure. So it's significant and unavoidable, and therefore we had to do the supplement.
Any other questions?
I have just a quick maybe not so quick, but just for my refresher, in terms of mitigating air quality and in carbon as well, is that unavoidable typically? Or I forget I know the dust stuff and from construction, but what are the approaches for mitigation of
Well,
traffic,
yeah,
increased traffic
so-
on air quality?
So there are actually air quality, air quality, I just need to be taller. Air quality, thank you, Michaela. Yeah, so air quality and even more so greenhouse gases can be tricky. You'll see a lot of EIRs that'll be prepared because of those 2 issues, primarily those 2 issues. But there are a couple things that you can do. Air quality is a little bit easier in that when we do the environmental analysis, we calculate what the air emissions will be. And if this project's small, then it's probably there'll be a threshold that the air district's established, probably be under the threshold. But for any projects of any size, they're over the threshold. So then you have to think about mitigation. And the question is there feasible mitigation that you can make the project do that'll reduce that? And there are it's hard to reduce it substantially within the project itself. So usually, no matter how many electric lawnmowers you give people and how many trails you have and that sort of thing, plus some of that stuff's hard to model, so you can't prove it, you'll probably be over the threshold. But then there are things like one that has used by Placer County, in Placer County quite a bit, including, I think we included in some Lincoln docs, I think, is to buy higher polluting vehicles and replacing them with lesser polluting vehicles. So for example, school buses. This was very popular at one time. The project would either contribute to a fund that was doing that sort of thing, if there's been one established, or it would be required to go out and find, go to the school district and replace some of their old buses. So, and then that if the aggregate emissions, if you can be sure that that's going to get you to a net emission level that's below the threshold, you're fine. The difficulty with that sort of thing is proving that you can do it. What if the school district's already on all natural gas buses or something, or electric buses? But there are often, Placer County Air District does have a fund.
Has
I believe,
there ever been a thought of paying into transit to, it wouldn't be as a direct mitigation, really?
You can,
or-
yes, so you can, so under CEQA, you can mitigate by paying a fee somewhere or buying something somewhere. So for example, with wetlands, it's very common that my project's going to fill an acre of wetlands. So the mitigation is that I pay a wetland bank to build 3 acres to offset the loss. And that's considered no net loss, boom, less than significant. And it's assumed that if they're certified and everything, they know what they're doing, you can prove it. There are also fee programs where air districts or someone will do these various projects. The problem is that under CEQA, you have to have evidence that it is in fact going to mitigate, and you don't always know. Now, the PCCP is an example, again, with biological resources, where there's been a determination that it would mitigate, and the city did environmental analysis on it and drew that conclusion. Harder with air, not impossible. And then with greenhouse gases, there's some contention around this, but for hopefully at some point there'll be a solid program where you can buy credits. And but again, you have to know, there has to be, this defined program that's been adopted and that you could show that it'll work.
Just one quick follow. Has anyone, are there lawsuits? I'm sure there are, but just wondering if on mitigation, like challenging the mitigation.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So there's
Yeah.
like, that's
Yeah.
constant.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, trying to think off the top of my head. I'm working on a project right now where, in Eastern Placer County, Tahoe area, sorry, I'm not good with direction. Where one of the challenges was to, a mitigation measure, because it didn't really draw, it was a transit mitigation measure, and it didn't really demonstrate that by paying this fee, there was going to be enough transit service. And so they had several other issues that were actually, more substantive. So they had to go out and do a revised DIR just on these, it's like 4 issue areas that the court agreed were not adequately analyzed. But some of it was mitigation.
Do you have any more questions for her before we move to the next? Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And I will just close in saying, if you, I'm a CEQA nerd, so if anyone ever has a question, Mel knows how to get a hold of me. I'd be happy to talk about any of these topics or respond to an email.
Thank you. Thank you. We have one more staff item.
I'm back. Just kind of want to preface this is kind of just a general plan evaluation update, similar to what we did last month. Again, I have a presentation, not really a presentation, more just some talking points that we can get through. All right. So I first off just want to thank you all for participating in our general plan evaluation process and providing your feedback. Appreciate you guys taking the time, reading through everything and, providing your feedback where possible. I did provide Commissioner Jackson some of our documents as well, so he is kind of in the loop on what's happening and what we've already done prior to his assignment to the commission. So first, I just kind of wanted to give you all a heads up on the findings that we brought together from the results you gave us, as well as some kind of next steps. I have one last homework assignment for you all. I promise I'll leave you alone after that. It's the same process as you already did last month, just for the last two elements we needed to cover. So hopefully it wasn't too strenuous or difficult to get through. And again, the feedback is valuable. So first, I'll just kind of break down the data and, what we found. First off, I just received all of your scoring sheets and from commissioners as well as planning staff. We received 6 responses as Commissioner Jackson wasn't yet available to give us responses. And for planning staff, we have a total of 4 responses. Based on the responses, a tally count was produced for both Planning Commission and for staff. The greater the count, the more people considered the policy important to implement. For all the goals that you guys all ranked within the top 5, we provided the top 3 scoring policies for both Planning Commission and staff. So first, we have Goal 1, which is essentially ensuring the city grows in an orderly pattern. Within this goal, there are 13 policies total. So for Planning Commission, the top 3 policies you wanted to focus on were housing choices, buffer areas, and quality design. In the case of policy 112, which focuses on quality design, 50% of the commissioners voted this within their top 3, compared to staff where 100% of us voted for this as being one of our most important policies within the goal. Staff thinks honestly that this is a great example of an implementable policy. There's action items, there are actual quantitative, useful language in here to where we can actually implement these items. There's a clear vision on what we want to see in projects within this language. Additionally, Planning Commission focused on the buffer area policy, while staff wanted to focus on the compact development. Next, we have, oh my goodness. My stuff didn't print out, but that's okay. So next we have the second goal, which focuses on residential development. 10 total policies within this goal. Planning Commission wanted to prioritize innovative development, airport buffer, and preserving and enhancing the quality of the existing residential areas within the city. For the innovative development policy, most of you voted that this is a top 3 policy, while for staff, about 75% of us voted that was a good policy to implement. What's interesting about this is the airport buffer zone. That is considered a pretty important policy for you all. 4 out of 6 of you voted for that, while staff, none of us voted for it. We believe in, just trying to get a sense of where we're thinking. We have a lot of things in place already to protect that airport zone. We have the airport obviously is zoned as industrial, but all the area surrounding it is zoned as that as well. We have general development plans that all take that airport into consideration. We have Placer County's airport land use compatibility plan, which is a whole separate document that has regulations and compatibility issues that provide regulation for any structures that go in there, to where we can protect what's there and kind of keep it safe from, we won't have residential development there or things that just don't mix well with that airport. So I think that's why staff kind of voted it so low or didn't provide any votes at all. The next one I kind of wanted to jump into was the land use policy 2.2 involving the preservation and enhancement of existing residential areas. Half of the commission voted that this was an important policy, while only 1 staff member voted for this policy. And just to kind of give you some context, Commissioner Johnson, I'm sure you're aware that this general plan was adopted in 2008 during your reign as city manager. We had a redevelopment agency at that time as well. That would kind of be their primary focus and goal within their department, to kind of rejuvenate what the city has to offer. And unfortunately, that agency was dissolved back in 2012. So our thoughts are, I think this policy kind of ties back into that era to where we don't really have the tools at the moment to really implement that. And then for land use 2.6, the land use designations, this kind of duplicates the housing choices one that was voted by you all as being within your top 3. It's interesting you guys didn't vote for it here, but all of staff voted for it here. The language in the housing policy one was a bit interesting. It kind of ties back into the city will promote the application of land use designs. It's a weird kind of funky language. What does will promote the application? It's kind of nonsense. While this policy for land use designations is clear, will provide the variety of residential land designations to meet the city's future needs, which would effectuate essentially apartments, duplexes, triplexes, single-family homes, all the different types of housing choices that we do want to see in the city. And lastly, we have goal 3, which has a total of 8 policies. This goal primarily focuses on commercial development. The Planning Commission voted that commercial land use, regional commercial opportunities, and prioritizing the central business district as being the most important policies within this goal. We've all heard that council is gung-ho for commercial and wants to see more of it, so that kind of ties into what we're already trying to accomplish, and we're just going to continue to try to implement that and kind of strengthen up the language of these policies as well to make sure we can do that.
Interesting, go back.
Yeah.
It's interesting that staff, go back one more, that staff, all 4 staff members voted that the city shall provide a variety of residential land designation that will meet future needs of the city. But then you go to the next one, only 2 think the city shall designate sufficient commercial land to meet the future needs of the city.
Right.
What do you think that means?
So I can't recall myself personally of how I voted. But I did kind of notice that too, of like, hi, I wonder where that came from. Let's see, the city should designate. So we are in this interesting kind of commercial scape. We have a lot that has already been designated for Village 5 with that new annexation. So I think that's kind of held off on that. Whether or not that'll get built, that's a different story. Christian, do you have any comments on that as well?
I voted for the strip commercial, shall avoid strip commercial, but I think there might be some wariness on staff, from staff's perspective on, well, first of all, there's kind of 3, there's some duplication and overlap in these commercial policies where I think we could capture the designation or the zoning for, or when and where possible, look to, or where feasible or fiscally studied, or, that there might be, I guess we're wary of over zoning for commercial in a way that you would have vacant commercial lags far behind residential. And for me personally, in looking at this, I just felt there might be a better way to capture that. I mean, obviously, we need commercial as a lifeblood of the city. I guess I just wasn't, for me, I saw this other, just for instance, I saw this avoid strip commercial, and I'm like, okay, that's concrete. Like, I think we can avoid that. I want to avoid that. I'm going to vote for that. I like that one.
I'm going to follow up on his question. Of the 4 people from the staff who voted, how many of them live in the city?
2.
So when you live in the city and you pray in the city and you shop in the city and you recreate in the city, you have a very different perspective than somebody who just works in the city. And I say that because I was involved with a study similar to this a long time ago, when all of the staff was living outside of the city. City had very small population at that time. It grew to 35,000. And so the people who lived outside of it, they didn't worry about it. They lived in a city that gave them all these things, And their perspective was very different to the people who said, I got to drive 10 miles to do that, right? So I think that's an important aspect of how people would look at this from staff who are professionals within the field versus lay people like ourselves who have family and all the rest of the concerns that are important to us day in and day out.
I think that's an important distinction as
Yeah.
well, because it's essentially why we've requested this information from you, because I personally don't live in the city to where I don't have that, feedback. I've heard, 12 Bridges, there's no grocery store, or, oh, I have to drive this far. I can only, it's only hearsay. It's not something that's lived in for myself, to where you all, as, being on the commission, it is an obligation
But
for you to live in the city.
I would argue that, yeah, not, I hear my mother-in-law and father-in-law live in Lincoln, and they are, chronically challenged by the lack of a grocery store in 12 Bridges, And so I think that kind of always falls into the economic development. Like, we can zone for that Safeway. It's zoned for it. Is it there? No, it's not there. We're not going out and making Safeway build there. So there's a distinction there. And I think, so maybe staff just kind of trying to get some conclusions and findings from this is that looking at it from a policy, like what policies we really liked, which are strong and like effectuated something or something that we could action. At least that's where my lens, but we have all these different lenses,
I think
so.
I think that's the challenge.
Yeah.
With the exercise, it's the lens, like, one word in one of these things threw me way off. I mean, one of them I really liked, and the last word was public transit. It's not that I don't like public transit, but I'm looking at it going in a
Tony,
suburban.
could you get a little closer
Yeah,
to the mic?
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. But then I got to the end of that policy, I think it was in the first one, and the word public transit was there, and that made me go, no, not gonna rate that high. Not because I don't like public transit, I just don't have a vision for how it would work
Yeah.
in a city that's got, with these suburban villages, right? I just don't see, I don't see society today using it out here like this. So then I was like, I'm gonna move that down.
Well, I think-
But you might
yeah.
not have that same lens. I think the concern that I have, although if it's real or not, but when I first look at that, I go, okay, we're right on the tipping point right now of a community, and you could say we're already there. We're a bedroom community, right? That's gone crazy with residential. We're at a point where do we have enough commercial to even provide, right, where it's difficult? Can we provide the services we need for residential? And then I look at that and go, wow, but is that where we're going to continue to focus? You know what I mean?
Yeah, some of it is like, I think this lens is really an interesting thing of like, are the policies strong and effective if we all interpret them very differently? Like, they should be more like, boom, we're all kind of captured on the same page. Maybe, I mean, this is the whole exercise of policy writing, and I think just putting on that hat of how to, do exactly.
There's a lot of redundancy. There's a lot of like they'll use one word that might sour that one for you, even though everything else is good. It was a difficult exercise, I'll be honest with you, for me to really get confident behind where my rankings were, right? It wasn't easy.
Yeah.
So
I was surprised to find that there wasn't one of these policy statements having to do with a focus on commercial developments as the heart of each village, new village.
So.
I don't know why
yeah.
we missed that, but.
So we do have, land use goal 15 is the village
Right.
policy. That's where all your village policies are held, to where within the top 5 ranking that I gave you all back in February, the village policy was not ranked within the commission or staff's top 5. So that's why it wasn't brought forth in this exercise. It was only 1, 2, 3, 6, and 8, but 6 and 8 both had very little policies, so there was no reason to provide a top 3 when there's 3 or 4 policies. So there are centrally locate commercial within village sites. That's just a different land use policy that we didn't look at with this exercise.
But it's in there.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I was hoping.
Yeah, so if you want to look at it, it's land use policies, it's land use 15.
And that is one that we've had challenges with, the central location.
Yeah.
Because grocery stores have scaled in a different way. And we went through that with Village 7, where we took out the centrally located neighborhood commercial. And we amended the specific plan for that, right? So that, the landscape has changed for retail, obviously, with big box and delivery, everything. And a lot of those neighbor commercials are just, they're maybe not viable anymore too.
Yeah. I had the pleasure of living in a master planned community for 31 years. It was an award-winning community with 9 neighborhoods, and each neighborhood in the master plan had a commercial piece. It had at least one church, et cetera. The churches are all there. The commercial's not there because the landscape changed, and the neighborhood grocery store from 60 years ago disappeared. There's a few of them left, but they basically disappeared. And we tend to shop now on the internet, or we go to the Costco or whatever. And then Walmart has answered that problem by having a Walmart neighborhood store in pretty much most of the country, where people go and get what they used to get from their corner grocery store. So the whole landscape has changed, and we're not going to be able to attract that. But Village 5 better have a whole bunch of commercial to bring that revenue into the city, the sales tax and the jobs and everything else. So
It
that's-
absolutely does.
That's my wish.
On a major intersection on a highway,
Yes,
which is what they're like
exactly. It's got-
gangbusters for.
it's got
Boom.
everything
Yeah,
going
Nelson
for it.
interchange, like they want an intersection on a
Yes.
highway, so.
I will say there's one, it's similar, it's a village concept within West Roseville. I'm not sure if you've visited Kitchen 747.
Yep.
But that community is really kind of, I think, what the village concept is always supposed to be. It's a very small neighborhood commercial. There's, local restaurants, a coffee shop, a gym, yoga studio, very small scale businesses. But that's what it could have been, to where it's got the high density around it, medium and kind of the sprawl out. It's kind of the most successful, granted, I don't know if Rosewood would say it, but those businesses are still in there, doing well. So I think there could be the potential, but it's just a different commercial landscape than your bigger stores out there.
What's the name of that neighborhood?
I want to say it's West Park is what it's called.
Over there.
Yeah,
If you get a chance, it really
Yeah.
does work. It's almost like its own little
yeah,
country club.
yeah,
Right? But you don't have to pay dues.
That's
Yeah.
a great
You just-
restaurant.
yeah.
Yeah,
Love
you
that
got a
restaurant.
restaurant.
And it's got the church right
gym.
across the street as well, similar
I
to
don't
what
go
you
to
were
the
saying.
church,
Yeah.
but I go there.
And how, the density, is it very high around it?
They're all single story, like more like townhome-esque looking design. Yeah, they're detached. They're, kind of similar, I think I would say, to the Aurora Heights community of within 12 Bridges that KB Home is currently building. Those very compact development, maybe 0 lot lines as well.
8 to 10,
I feel like
20 acre.
Yeah.
I feel like the density around that, though, the density, it lessens as you get further from it.
Exactly,
right? So
exactly.
right around it is real tight, and then it turns into more of communities like, like Lincoln Crossing as you get a little bit away
Right.
from it, right?
Yeah.
Hey,
So my last slide for you is just the homework assignment I have for you. This will be the last one, I promise. We're just going to knock out the open space and the transportation policies. Again, this is based off of the results of the goals ranking that you provided us. So I will send out a Excel spreadsheet to you all tomorrow for some feedback. And again, what we're trying to do is just get your feedback on what you want to see implemented in projects, and then we can kind of proceed and move forward either internally with staff or get a consultant on board to kind of see how these projects, how these policies have been implemented in projects. Yes, no, how, where are we at with it? And hopefully, if we're not implementing them, we can see some language text changes that can ultimately effectuate that policy.
Or do you guys find this like dipping your toe into it and trying to put on your policy hats? Like, I mean, at the very least, we're all tuning up on the general plan and kind of cracking the bug. So are you seeing it as something that's been helpful or kind of engaging?
Just remember that several of our members have a 60-hour job besides this.
And
We're
that's why I
doing it,
send
we're
out the reminder emails.
tiptoe,
like,
walking on
yeah.
eggshells.
Yeah. I do my best I totally understand things get lost in the inbox and there are other priorities and everyone I will say has been on time. So I have no complaints there. I don't mind if you send it to me right on that due date. We're good. But yeah,
And just mention that we have a consultant who's undertaking 3 specific general plan amendments. One is to bring the high-density zoning designation from 20 units per acre to 30 units per acre, and that is per state, I guess, law. And then the second one is open space. We're looking at the open space, the 40% open space requirement. And that is one of council's strategic plan goals is to reevaluate the 40% and not to do away with it, but just to get a better outcome of how to utilize that open space. So we're going to be looking at that. And then the third is inclusionary affordable housing, to give some policy alternatives on whether or not Lincoln will be requiring affordable housing to be included in a development, either through fees or through actual units built, and what percentage of units that would be for a project. So those are actually, we're looking at those as we speak, kind of on a separate track, but they'll be coming through the process here too.
Okay,
that's all I have for you all tonight. So keep an eye out for my email.
well, thank you. Thank you very much. Any comments on this before we move on? Okay. We're now down to item 10, general business. There is none. And 11, commission comments. We'll start over here if you have any.
None at this time.
Tony? Gary?
I just wanted to commend Michaela.
I'll second that motion.
Okay.
And with that, we'll call the meeting adjourned.